So you've got to a position in life where you've got a fair few animals and you want to learn how to save a few quid. You're looking into breeding your own live food. You want to know which one's going to be cost effective and easiest. This video I'm going to show you that. We're going to run through superworms and Dubia roaches, run through the startup costs, how much space they require, absolutely everything, the upkeep, the running costs, how much it costs to feed the animals and what production you get out of them, so you can make a decision to see which one's going to be best for you. Coming up now. Welcome back to Northern Exotics, guys. On this channel we talk all things reptile related, whether it be specific species care or breed your own live food, little life hacks, anything like that to do with reptiles. If this is something you're interested in, please consider subscribing, and while you're there, hit that notification bell just so you get notified next time I do upload a video. On this video we're going to be talking all things to do with Dubia roach breeding and superworm breeding. Which one is going to be best for you? If you already do breed Dubia roaches or superworms, let me know in the comment section below. I'd love to hear how you found it, how you've got on, or if you want to learn how to breed any other style of live food, let me know in the comments below, and I'm sure we'll have a good conversation down there when this is all over. So let's start off with how much does it cost to start up these colonies. We're going to run through Dubia roaches first and then move on to superworms. So a Dubia roach colony, what you need to start this whole colony is a tub of some description. It all depends on how big you want to start your colony. So for me, I had 50 roaches. That's 40 females and 10 males. That's the perfect ratio for a perfect breeding colony for Dubia roaches. Now that sustains my colony and adds a few extras so that I can keep the colony revolving. There's always going to be youngs being put back into the older Dubia roaches to keep the colony rejuvenated. Every sort of 6 months or so, I will put new blood back into the colony. But that's going off topic. Back to what it costs to start with. For me, I've got this 36 litre rub. Everything I do mention throughout this video will all be linked in the description below so that you can go down there and have a price up in yourself and have a look around and stuff like that. But a 36 litre rub is what I use to start with. I don't need anything else in the container too much because they can't climb the container, so I don't need anything to stop them coming out of the container. So it's just the container itself, the 36 litre rub. Then you've got inside the container, I've got a couple of dishes for food and moisture. That's all I need. But the food I use is dog biscuits. Sometimes I go organic and go onto leafy sort of materials, the lettuce and stuff like that. And then for the moisture source, I use fruit. So high moisture retaining fruit, apples, oranges, pears, anything like that to keep them moisturated. Yeah, that's it. That whole colony so far has only cost me a couple of quid. The egg crates that are inside there, here's a top tip for you. The egg crates can become quite expensive buying them online if you're looking around online. If you go to your local cafe, if you've got a busy cafe nearby, there's just like a small chain cafe, run in there first thing in the morning and say, can you keep back all your egg crates and I'll come in a bit later on today and pick them all up off you. Normally they go, yeah, not a problem, especially the companies that love recycling. If you mention that in your initial pitch to start with, they're going to be all for it. So that's a great top tip. I do it. I go to a local one called Cassandra's and I've picked up 30 egg crates and that's lasted me a year so far. I do use them for other little aspects. Sometimes I use them for the kids' art projects at school as well, but I've got them. There's a supply there and it took me a little trip into town and back again. That's all it was. So they were free. You can get them free as well. Online they run out about $3.99. The tub itself cost me £8 and then the food dishes were just little plastic takeaway containers that I cut a little hole in the side so they can get in and out dead easy. That's it. That is the startup cost for a Dubia roach breeding colony. If you wanted to add heat, now for me, I have free heat because I have it on top of my basking spot for my bearded dragon. If you don't have that luxury, you can use a heat mat. You can use it regulated on a thermostat. Again, they're all linked in the description below. Not entirely necessary. You can just put them in the highest part of your room, and that way heat rises in your room. So you can put them high up and that'll be enough heat to sustain them, but their breeding growth won't be significant. It won't be a massive amount of breeding because they do need the heat to get them going, to get them to thrive really well. That's the startup cost for a Dubia Roach. If you want to learn all the process involved in how to set up for a Dubia Roach colony, I'll stick it in the card just above here. Click on that, that'll take you through to a video dedicated to how to set up a Dubia Roach breeding colony. Let's move on to superworms. Now this can get a little bit more complicated. You need a tub to stick them in. So for me, I've got this tower tub and it's absolutely perfect. It cost me £5 from a local cheap shop. I think it was Wilkinson's or something like that. Just a local cheap shop. That tub, perfectly fine. I disinfected it with F10 disinfectant before I used it, just in case there was any residue left on it from manufacturing. Then inside it I use oats. Just bog standard, cheap and cheerful, Walmart, Asda, Tesco's oats. Porridge oats. It cost me £1 for that bag and it's lasted me 6 weeks. So I'm perfectly sustainable for that. That's absolutely fine. For their moisture substance, because they eat their oats, they also eat the moisture substance, something to give them a bit of moisture where they can't have actual water to save the risk of drowning. I feed them on leftover banana peel, so that's cost me nothing as well. Every time my lad has a banana, I chuck it in with the superworms. That's free. So far, we've only spent £6, absolutely perfect. But then it gets complicated. You need these little 1 ounce tubs that have got these lids on. Punch a little hole in the top, and that's how you separate your superworms so that you can get them to pupate into pupa to turn into beetles. They cost me around about £5 for 100 of them. So that's definitely an expense you need to take into consideration. Now moving on to the heating, I don't have heating on mine. I have them high up in the room so they're a little bit warmer than room temperature, and that sustains them perfectly fine. So you don't need to buy any additional heating products for these. And then for the actual beetles, they can live in your little tower stack that I showed to start with. I have a few too many beetles now, so I've started selling a few, but you can have a bigger tub for the beetles with a lid. You may need to purchase that tub as well. But that's the startup costs for both Dubia roaches and superworms. And again, if you wanted to learn more in depth on how to set up a superworm breeding farm, I'll stick a card just up here. Click on that, it'll take you straight over to the actual video that I've already done about how to set up a superworm breeding farm. Let's move on to sustainability. How easy are they to care for? Now for Dubia roaches, all you really need to do with the Dubia roaches is leave them in their enclosure. That is it. Keep them fed and watered. Once a week I'll change out the food, change out the moisture substance. That's about it. Once a week I will give them a gentle mist down because they do like that slightly higher humidity. Just helps them molt that a little bit easier. But that is all I really do to the Dubia roaches. If you wanted to go more in depth with the Dubia roaches, you can separate the babies out when they do start having babies. That way the mothers of the babies will be concentrating on the next round of breeding as opposed to caring for the babies. Separate the babies out, set them up in a new enclosure if you please. I personally don't do that anymore. And that is one way you can do it with the Dubia roaches. It's not that time consuming either. It takes around about 6 weeks for their babies to start hatching. Once the adults have first come into their first adult molt, then they'll start breeding, then they'll start gestating inside their stomachs, then they'll lay the babies. It takes about 6 weeks, and then every 4 weeks after that, you'll have babies. Dubia roaches can lay 9 litters of babies throughout their entire life, so they are really sustainable and really sturdy. They are a good choice to go for. They can lay anywhere from 5 to 35 babies per litter. Now that doesn't sound like an awful lot, but when you times that by 9 times a year, the numbers start racking up. Up here, right now, there's a card and that shows you how to breed Dubia roaches faster. There's a few little tips and tricks you can do to help them breed a little bit faster. So that's definitely worth a watch. Let's move on to superworms, shall we? Now, superworms are pretty much the same. I put a banana peel or two in with the superworms, the babies, and the beetles, while still remembering from the pupa stage, so the middle stage between superworm and beetle, that pupa stage, they don't require any food or moisture, but they severely require air. They go through a lot of air because they're still a breathing animal, so you've got to make sure they've got air, but they don't need food or water. About once a week I'll change them through and just give them a new moisture source, remembering they eat the oats, so you don't really need to change the food out. The oats is there perfectly fine. Once the adult beetles die off, you just got a load of eggs and slight babies and stuff like that, and you don't really need to be cleaning them out dead regular. The word of warning with superworms is they can get quite dusty. It can get up your nose without you even knowing, and it can cause an allergic reaction style thing, a bit like hay fever. You'll end up sneezing and coughing, your eyes will end up puffy and stuff like that. That's only if you do a really big clean out and it does get a bit dusty. Sustainability wise though, they are pretty good. They can be a little bit tricky with constantly having to separate superworms into the little containers, putting them in a dark hiding place, letting them pupate, taking the pupa out, putting it in a separate container ready for it to metamorphose into a beetle. That's where it can get quite time consuming. For easeability, Dubia Roach is definitely trump on this scenario. But this card right up here, if you don't know how to breed superworms, this video will show you absolutely everything you need to know for how to breed superworms. The big one, which one smells the worst? Because you don't want to be having that smell inside your home if you are breeding these at home. And in all honesty, none of them smell. The only nuisance you get is a little bit of noise. The Dubia Roaches scurry an awful lot and you hear that sort of sound throughout the entirety that they're there. Me personally, I actually like that sound, and you do get used to it. It sounds like rain on the window sort of sounds. I'm in the living room, my Dubia Roaches are in my reptile room. I can't hear it now, it's only a very subtle sound, but the sound is there. With superworms, you don't get any sound or any smell, so that's definitely worth considering there. The superworms definitely trump on this article.
Dubia Roaches sound just like this. Yeah, I like that sound.
Now let's move on to the general running costs throughout the entirety of your breeding life. The whole time you're breeding roaches, how much is it going to cost you? I'm going to work this out at a per week stand so that you can just get the gist of it. You can work out the maths over a year if you want to. But to start off with, I've done the setup costs. I'm talking now from when it's set up and they're breeding. So it's going to cost you next to nothing. It really is going to cost you next to nothing if you're wise and if you're clever. So take for instance, we'll start with Dubia Roaches. I feed my Dubia Roaches on a mix of dog biscuits and organic material. So the dog biscuits, I bought a big bag of dog biscuits, just the meaty chunks, pedigree chum, and that has lasted me over 6 months and it's still there. I just put a few in every week, let them munch away at it. Sometimes you can grind it up in a food blender, put it in, and again it'll just last you months and months. It cost me £3 or something like that, dead cheap, and that's lasted me this long. The organic matter, most of the time it's just what I've got lying around the house. So if I've got apples in the house, they'll have an apple. Chop it in half, an apple will last 50 roaches for a week easily. With bananas, you tend to, if you put a banana in there, you're going to have to get it out the next day, otherwise it'll attract fruit flies and stuff like that. But if I use pears, again, high in water retention, they are a good substance. They'll last about 3 days. Oranges, they will just last and last and last until the roaches have annihilated them. And again, it lasts about a week. But you can use one apple and that'll last you a week. You can use one orange, that'll last you a week perfectly fine. You can pick them up for 30p out of a shop if you need to, or just use whatever you've got in the cupboard just to use them. Same for superworms as well. My superworms, I have to replace the oats once every 4 months or so. Just pour some fresh oats in, get them nice and new food, new oats, new substrate, all that sort of stuff. And then their moisture substance, banana peel, is just waste product. Waste not, want not, so to speak. Every time a lad has a banana, I took the banana peel in with the superworms and the mealworms and stuff like that. So they're free to run on food. The Dubia Roaches, if you use electric, you're going to be having an electric cost in that as well. So your heating supplements. For me, I've got free electric on that one. It's free heat because it's on top of the bearded dragon's basking spot, so it doesn't cost me a penny. Become creative and you can do something like that as well. If you're using a supplemental heat source like a heat mat, a 14 watt heat mat over 24 hours a day on a thermostat, a Ministat 100, it's only going to cost you £1.75 a week. That's just on my electric tariff and stuff like that. Superworms, obviously, if they don't need heat, they're put higher up in the room. They just benefit from your central heating costs. That's it. If you want to learn how to breed Dubia Roaches, click on this card right here. That'll go through all the details on how to breed Dubia Roaches. But let's move on to which one's more fun. If you're doing this and you've got a family, you want to have the little fun aspect involved in it all. So for Dubia Roaches, you can get the children involved. You can, Charlie, go and feed the Dubia Roaches and stuff like that. You can get the kids involved. You can get the kids to go in, they can look around, they can physically see the Dubia roaches breeding. They can see them molting, which is a fascinating process to see if you do catch that. You can see the little babies running around, and then you can see the babies growing up perfectly fine. For superworms, however, you can't really see much of that. You can see the process between separating them out. You can see them pupate into beetles. You can see them just grow in general like that. And it's a fascinating process to see that. However, you can't see them breeding, you can't see them molting or anything like that. The babies are microscopic, so it's really hard to see them as well. And the other downside to superworms is the dust. Again, you don't want the dust to go up into your children's noses or anything like that, but they can get involved with separating the superworms out into their separate tubs and watching them pupate into pupa and then metamorphose into beetles, which is a fascinating process to see all in general. So you can make your own mind up there, but for me, I prefer Dubia roaches. But which one is the healthiest for your animal? It doesn't matter on the health side of things too much. I prefer Dubia roaches, they are healthier. However, for your animals, a variety is key. You need a massive variety of all different live foods to enrich your animal on a dietary level. That's highly recommended. Always worth adding variety into your animal's diet. But Dubia roaches do sustain less fat and more nutrition. Because the Dubia roaches have got the extra hard exoskeleton, they cover a little bit more calcium and D3 within their system anyway. So Dubia roaches are a little bit more healthier. So to summarise, superworms are cheaper to run long term because they don't have the electric bill of the heating source attached to them. They produce a little bit more than Dubia roaches, but Dubia roaches are easier to set up, they're easier to breed, and they don't require an awful lot of care. So in this section, Dubia roaches win. If you've enjoyed this video and you want to see more videos by me, this playlist up here is a breed your own live food playlist. It's got all things breed your own live food related in that playlist. This one down here is my reptile room tour. Go and check it out and see what animals I've got. If you want to subscribe, click on that one just there, and that one down there is Reptile Systems UK. Click on that and go and subscribe to them. Peace out, guys.